Hey, everybody. Welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vossoughian. Today on the show, what is the Trump administration's endgame in Iran? We're going to talk to NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake about what the president told him in a phone call last night. Up first, though, we have something really special for you. We have seen the bombing and we have seen the destruction from inside of Iran since this war began on Saturday. But we haven't heard from the people on the ground there inside Iran, the Iranians that are experiencing this war right now. There are two reasons for that. The first is it's really hard for them to access anything outside of Iran. There is an internet blackout. The only way they can access people outside of Iran is either through using a VPN or through using Starlink. And not everybody has that. And now the VPNs aren't even working. The second reason is people are scared. People are scared to talk to journalists and even their relatives outside of the country because they're afraid they're going to be targeted by the current regime. In spite of the fact that the supreme leader has in fact been killed, they're still worried because the regime is wanting to make sure that they remain in power and nobody dissents domestically, internally inside of Iran. But I've reported on Iran for many years. I have a lot of sources on the ground. And there is one man who has agreed to speak to me because he feels as if this is his purpose now.
Kourosh, salam. Halit khoube?
Salam. Khubam, merci.
So I'm going to switch to English now. For our listeners, I want to explain to people that we're not using your real name. I'm talking to you and calling you Kourosh because that's what we've decided to call you. We're not hearing your real voice as well to ensure your safety there in Iran amidst this war. That is upon your own request. Do you mind telling me why it is, Kourosh, that you wanted to do this interview in the first place?
He had enough. I'm in my 30s, okay? From childhood, I've seen that there are billboards of destruction of Israel. In school, every morning we were chanting death to America, death to Israel. This is has to do with us. I want to just live a happy life, a good life, be prosperous. But this ideological, dictators, terrorists, has ruined so many generations in Iran. They have killed so many people. They have killed Iraqis by funding their militias. They have killed Lebanese, Palestinians, Syrians, thousands upon thousands of Iranians. And I think our name as Persians deserves much better because of our culture.
Kourosh, you asked me to make you anonymous, right? We're not using your name, I mentioned. We're scrambling your voice. I'm not seeing your face, but we know you are in fact in Tehran. What are you so worried about?
I'm worried about, this is an open surgery. Right now the body is open, okay? You cannot just leave it like that. It will turn into an infection. I'm afraid if the help and military action will stop so they can recover. And again, after stopping, they will come and hunt for us, hunt people like me.
Are you worried about that right now, that you will be hunted by the Iranian government if they figure out your identity, that you're speaking to me?
Of course. If they know that I own a Starlink to get connected to you, I don't know, maybe they will kill me right away.
Kourosh, these bombings started on Saturday. If you could take us back to that moment on Saturday, where were you? What did you hear? What did you see around you?
It happened at 10 a.m., about 10 a.m. My friend called me. And once he told me that this happened, I was exhilarated. That finally someone stood to these nasty people. Nasty people who just machine gun, empty-handed protested. I heard Beit Rahbari is hit, the House of Leadership, they call it, is hit, and there is continuous, bombing. And to be honest, I was just so happy so happy. I was in all protests, okay? And I feel much safer with U.S. and Israel attacking me than I am in protests. I'm just, it's okay. I'm going everywhere. I hear bombing and I feel safe somehow.
There are people that are very scared that I've been speaking to as well inside of Iran. Not because they don't support regime change, but because they're afraid of losing their life before they can even see it. Have you spoken to these people? Is there a sense of fear there on the ground right now?
Yes, there are. There are fear of change. There are fear of death. There are fears of sound. But this is, we have tried everything. Everything. This is the only way that they are going to leave. Okay. I told my parents, even if I'm dead, even if my house is bombed by U.S. or Israel, they are not responsible. Regime is responsible. They have caused this.
What did your parents say to that?
They agree.
They agree. What has life been like since the war began?
It feels like early stage of COVID-19. It's like that. Food and water it's okay. Electricity sometimes goes out, but mainly a majority of times is up and running. Regime called for 1 week of closeness. It's like they shut down the whole country for 1 week so they can mourn, as they say, for the supreme leader. But we know that they did it because they wanted people to get out of the major cities. So people are not revolting. And they cut the whole internet just because they don't want us to speak up.
The president has said, we'll do the bombing and then Iranians do the overthrow. Do Iranians have the capacity to change the regime? Do they have the tools that they need?
We don't have the tools, but we have the capacity and we have the experience. But there are factors. One is we need to be armed, but there needs to be air support because they will shoot us. There needs to be weapon drop inside Tehran. That's how it will happen because they are armed to teeth. They are having 50 caliber machine gun on top of the cars. We cannot do it with fists. I wish this wasn't like this. I wish we could just go out, protest, they would resign, go, and we can just, make a better country. But that's not how it is, unfortunately.
Kourosh, you said you're in your early 30s. You've never seen a free Iran. You were born after the Iranian Revolution. Before the revolution, there was a monarchy. It has been a very long time since there was a democratic election inside of Iran. Do you think Iran has the ability to sustain democracy? Is that what you want once this war ends?
Yes. Iran has the capacity to just, have this full democracy. Why I'm saying this? Because in the last 47 years, somehow, because of all the damage we have endured, all the, pain this regime caused to us, we have somehow became, political, scientists. Everyone, the taxi driver, supermarket, owner. It's like we know the scarcity of freedom, democracy, secularism. Okay, everyone is talking about it. You talk to a cleaner on the street, they know it. They know it.
You seem to get emotional in talking about this, the future of your country and where it may or may not go, because this is not assured.
Stressed, and if there is no stress, then it doesn't matter. But I know for a fact that so many people love this country. We have tremendous amount of patriots, inside, outside. We are a proud nation. We are culturally rich. We care about art. We care about living, laughing, dancing, listening to music. Everything that any human needs to just, create meaning in their life, but they have, made us to just suppress those feelings, everything. When we dance, they suppress. We want to just, sing a song, they suppress. So it's enough is enough. Either, freedom or death.
Are you afraid of dying?
Not anymore. Not anymore.
Why?
Um, I'm above 30 years old, okay? I have experienced this regime. I have lost money, financial issue. I have seen people suffering. For me, it's like I don't care anymore that much about my life as long as it's meaningful. And this is one of the ways that, like now I'm talking to you, this is one of the ways that I can make it meaningful.
Kourosh, I thank you for talking to us. I know that you are risking a lot to do this interview, and so I am thankful that you took the time, and I certainly pray and hope that you and your family and everybody around you remain safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. God bless Iran. God bless United States of America, and God bless Israel. We will be united once again.
Kourosh is just one of many voices of the people that I've spoken to inside of this country, inside of Iran. There are also others who still support this regime. We're out in the streets now mourning the death of the supreme leader. This is an incredibly tense time in this country. And while Kourosh's voice is very important, there are many opinions and many voices inside of Iran as we continue to cover this conflict. We just heard a firsthand account of what life is like inside Iran right now. U.S. and Israel have both said their war campaigns will not stop until there are significant changes inside of Iran, including in the leadership. But it's not clear what the end game actually looks like. At the same time, President Trump has shaken up leadership at the Department of Homeland Security, the very agency that is tasked with protecting Americans from terrorist threats. So I want to bring in NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake, who spoke to the president late Thursday. Hey, Garrett.
Howdy.
Let me ask you, what time do you actually call the president? Is this a late night phone call? Is it a dinner phone call?
It was 8 o'clock last night as we were in the process of putting our kids to bed in the Haake household. And as the president was winding down his day, I had a 3.5-year-old editorial assistant eating a banana sitting next to me while I was on the phone with the president. It was a little bit unusual.
There is nothing better for me than picturing that very moment. Yeah. So with that all in mind, if we're picturing this phone call, I want to start with Iran. There has been reporting that the president wants to be involved in picking the country's next leader. What did he tell you about potential succession plans and how involved he wants to be?
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear from our conversation that he wants to be involved. I think his model is still what he did in Venezuela, where they were able to essentially tap another leader already in the country who has a popular base, who can be, if not a puppet, at least more acquiescent to the way America wants to see that country governed. So he wouldn't give me names, he wouldn't give me numbers, but he did tell me there is a short list. And I think the most interesting thing he told me is I asked him, I said, okay, what are you doing to make sure these people end this conflict still alive? And he said that we're watching them. So that means, this isn't a theoretical exercise. They do have specific people who they're trying to make sure are not targeted or killed accidentally during the course of this war, because there are folks in Iran, likely somewhere in that power structure, who the U.S. thinks could be pro-American or at least not anti-American future leaders of Iran.
You asked the president about the comments that were made by Iran's foreign minister yesterday in an interview with Tom Yamas on NBC News, and how he suggested that, in fact, they are, quote unquote, ready for a ground invasion inside of Iran. What did he tell you? And what are potential next steps when it comes to this war with Iran?
Well, first of all, I thought that was one of the most interesting back and forths from Tom's interview, because I almost got the sense from the foreign minister's side of it that they were daring the United States to take that step, daring the United States to invade. I mean, if you're Iran and you want to make this a bloody, costly war for America, you need more Americans around that you can hit. And that was the way I read the foreign minister's comment. And that was kind of the way I presented it to the president. What do you think of this idea? And he rejected it so directly that I almost thought he was going to hang up the phone on me. He said, that's a wasted comment from him and a wasted question from me. That he rejected entirely the idea of a ground invasion, saying, we've already destroyed their navy, we're destroying everything. Basically, it's not necessary. That the air campaign and sea campaign thus far have been so successful that a ground invasion is not something that he's considering. That said, we didn't get into the specifics of what about what about boots on the ground, what about intelligence, what about arming the Kurds, for example, in the north of Iran? Is that something that would involve the U.S. more? So I think there's still wiggle room here, because I know we also across NBC we have our own reporting. We've picked up on reporting from other outlets about the president kind of going back and forth on this idea of boots on the ground. And other folks at the White House have been much less willing to take that off the table. So all that's to say, invasion seems out. Smaller U.S. presidents on the ground in some capacity, I don't think is something we can rule out. What he did say is that the bombing pace will continue and, in fact, could accelerate over the next couple of days, which is in line with what we've heard from the Pentagon, that as Iran's air defenses have been more and more taken out, the U.S. can go after other targets more aggressively.
It feels as if, as we're watching this war play out, that the line keeps moving, right? This thing will be over in a couple weeks, then maybe it'll be more than a couple weeks. In a briefing yesterday, U.S. Central Command said that since day one of this war, ballistic missile attacks from Iran have decreased by 90% and drone attacks have decreased by 83%. The president indicated to you that the pace and, as you mentioned, the intensity of these strikes are going to continue. What do we know from the administration as to how long they think this thing is going to go on and how long Iran can last within this war?
The administration has tried very hard to avoid timelines. It's more like the war will end when the objectives are accomplished and here's a checklist. And even when the president throws out these 4 or 5 week timelines, he also says, but we're ahead of schedule. So what does that really mean? This morning, he posted on Truth Social that the war will only end when Iran surrenders. That wasn't what we heard from the military goals here. So I think it's fair to say that we have a pretty incomplete picture of what the timeline would be. If we want to take the White House and the Pentagon at their word here, the goals that need to be accomplished here are the functional dismantling of their nuclear program, the dismantling or destruction of their ballistic missiles that exist, and their ability to manufacture them. So going after the Iranian manufacturing base, which could potentially be the kind of thing that takes a long time in a country that's more than twice the size of Texas, and eliminating the Iranian Navy, which the administration has put on quite a public show of blowing up ships and releasing those videos. So that's what they say they want to do, but how long it's going to take and what other assets might be needed to accomplish it, I think are an open question, and maybe by design. If you never fully outline the very specifics of your goals, then it's easier to declare victory and decide you're done when you decide you're done, which is a tool the president uses politically all the time.
Let's switch to something that's happening domestically as well. I'm talking about DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. The president announcing on Thursday that she will no longer be in that job and that he is replacing her with Senator Markwayne Mullin. DHS was founded to protect Americans from terrorist attacks. The agency is also in the midst of a partial government shutdown, some of it still being funded by the big, beautiful bill. From your conversation with the president, what did he say about the timing of her firing and what he is pointing to directly?
Well, this was interesting because I feel like what the president wanted my takeaway to be from the conversation was that this was done because of how much he likes Markwayne Mullin, and that he thought Markwayne Mullin would be the right person to sort of take over the next phase of the DHS mission. He thanked Kristi Noem in public and in private to me. It was only when I pressed him a little bit about this Senate hearing from earlier in the week where she got grilled about this ad campaign, this $200 million plus ad campaign for DHS, which basically starred her. And whether or not the president knew about it, the president tipped his hand a little bit and said, yeah, he wasn't happy about that. And he kind of made a joke that running for president cost him less than that. And that he didn't know about the ad campaign until that grilling had happened. I'll tell you from our own reporting, Yasmin, it was pretty clear Thursday morning, like when all of us got to work, that something was up. We were hearing all these rumors about Noam and the president being angry. And in fact, we were getting people confirming that the president had been calling around asking people, what do you think about the job that she's doing? And if there's one thing that's been consistent with him across these two terms, it's like that's the death knell. Once the president starts polling people about you, if the results he gets aren't good, you're toast.
Any safety concerns in this handover? Did the president allude to that?
Well, in theory, it's going to be like a Olympic track handover where they're both running at full speed before they pass the baton. Technically, Noam is still in the job until the end of the month, which should be enough time for Markwayne Mullin, who's a popular Republican senator. People think he's a bright guy and that he's fully capable of doing this job, at least among other senators, to complete a handoff that doesn't have anybody not in charge for any period of time. Now, whether or not Kristi Noem is really doing the job in the next couple of weeks, I think is an open question. And also kind of what might fall through the cracks with an administration or with an organization that's already partially shut down, I think are good questions. But at least on paper, this is designed to lessen the risk of something falling through the cracks in this moment.
Garrett Haake, enjoy your weekend. It's been a long week.
I will. Thanks, Yas.
All right. That is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vossoughian. We'll see you Monday with whatever the weekend may bring. And if you like what you heard and you saw, press the subscribe button. Also, by the way, daylight savings time is Sunday. You're going to have to set your clocks forward an hour, but summer is almost here. We'll see you Monday.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.